we have looked at is half of how our brains deal with information. This data comes to us from physics. The other data we need to look at comes from philosophy of science. It's to do with how our brains deal with sensory input. Millions of pieces of data bombard our brains all the time, rippling through our minds. Our brains are very selective with this data. Some are quite deliberately filtered out, so we don't perceive those data. For knowledge to be valid, it is essential, critical even, to understand the nature of this filter. In The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, Thomas Kuhn called this filter a paradigm, defining it as a certain set of ideas which frame perception, thinking, and behavior. I call it a noetic imperative. That's rather complicated to explain. Just think of it as a storyboard. The existence of this filter means that in constructing the images that comprise the virtual reality we call the physical universe, our brains have not one input, but two: sensory input and storyboard. First filter, our body. What we can match in vibration in some part of our body is the first filtering of what parts of reality we can perceive. Second filter, our mind. What we can match in the tenor of the storyboard in our mind is the second filtering of what parts of reality we can perceive. In other words, our brains have the ability to modify, invert, or delete sensory input. We are not used to the idea that our brains can tweak data. Here's an example. If you wear prism glasses, you see the world upside down. Story is, if you do so continuously for something like 6 weeks, the brain adapts. It changes how it interprets the signals it receives from the eyes and turns the world the right way around. So you now see the world upside up, not upside down, while wearing the prism glasses. What is fascinating are the implications of the next step. If you now take off the glasses, you see the world upside down with the naked eye. Stop and think about that. What does it mean if the brain can change data to this extent, turn the world upside down for mere convenience? Where else does it so subvert data? The evidence suggests that the reliability of empirical data needs to be subject to some other checks than the mere observation of the senses. The world was never upside down, neither with nor without prism glasses. Here's another thing. Research at Pittsburgh University by Matthew Botvinnik and Jonathan Kuhn about another thing our brains can do. 1. Hide your hand behind a box on the table so that you can't see it. 2. Arrange a rubber hand on the table so that from your point of view, it looks like your real hand. 3. A friend should stroke both the rubber hand and the real hand at the same time, in the same place, many times. After a few minutes of repeating step 3, if your friend hits the rubber hand, you will feel a surge of pain, since your brain is convinced that the rubber hand is real. When emotion subverts our perception, it can actually get dangerous. The evidence suggests that the filtering function of the brain is such that it can override or invert the information coming from the senses. A dramatic example is the slaughter of some 290 innocent civilians on Air Iran Flight 655 on the 3rd July 1988. Its fate shows that emotion, in this case fear, can have the brain change sensory input totally. The context was a crisis in the Gulf, with the naval officers on the US ships in the vicinity getting caught up in a crescendoing hysteria that an attack was imminent. As the tension reached breaking point, an aircraft came on the radar screen of the ship in question. on the 13th July 1992, Newsweek reported. Petty officers Anderson and Leach both began singing out that the aircraft was descending and picking up speed. Anderson's screen showed that the plane was traveling 380 knots at 12,000 feet and climbing. Yet Anderson was shouting out that the speed was 455 knots, the altitude 7,800 feet, and descending. We don't normally work on the basis that our brains can show us the opposite of the data that is actually entering the eye. 12,000 feet and climbing would signify the plane was behaving in safe mode. Less than 9,000 feet and descending could be attack mode. Newsweek reported that all passengers and crew died.